Warning. This episode contains foul language, as well as mentions of suicide, murder, pedophilia, and kidnapping.
Hi, weirdos! You are listening to Keep It Weird, the podcast for all things strange and unusual, unsettling and unnerving, creepy and crawly, and all around mystifying. Each week we get to sit down and chat about something weird, and this week is no exception. We've covered several unsolved mysteries on this show before. We've rubbed our chins in thought, we've pondered, we've even pulled out our hair, trying to imagine what in the world could have happened to these people, places, and things. We thought it was time to take a break from the wondering and talk about some solved mysteries. Some that went unsolved for decades, some that looked like one thing and turned out to be another, and some with so many twists and turns you almost forgot where it started in the first place. Last week, Amy chronicled the horrific story of the Stainer family, and this week, Amy is back, and Lauren and I are telling you guys about two more mysteries that went from unexplained to very explained. My name is Ashley, and I'm alone in my living room, introducing you to the episode. Hi, guys. Love you. Old business. Next week, we have an Ask a Weirdo episode. Lauren and I got like 40 questions, which is amazing. Thank you to everyone who sent some in. Tomorrow, as in Saturday, September 11th. Oh, 9/11. Huh. Well, tomorrow, September 11th, we are pulling 3 patron names out of a hat to give away free copies of the book that I was just published in. For those of you who don't follow our social media, first of all, where are you at? We have a ton of fun on there, but yeah, for those of you who don't follow our social media, the book is called The Feminine Macabre. It's volume 2, and it's a collection of articles and essays written by women and non-binary individuals about the paranormal. There are essays chronicling strange hauntings, paranormal investigators throughout history, hoaxes, tarot. It's really, really wonderful, and you guys should absolutely check it out or join our Patreon today, Friday, September 10th, my father's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad. This is spiraling. Happy birthday, Daddy. Join our Patreon today, September 10th, to put your name in the hat to win a copy. And you'd be supporting a show that you love. It's a win-win. Win-win-win. Win-win for you, win for me. Okay, before we get into it, as usual, when we cover anything true crime, there's going to be mentions of suicide, murder, kidnapping, pedophilia. It's dark, all right? It's super dark, and we are total goobs, so we make jokes throughout, but nothing about these stories are funny. Nothing about them are comical. It's just a comedy podcast. If anything we say offends you, I really, truly apologize. It was absolutely unintentional. And most of the things we say, we don't even mean. We just say it to be funny. So sit back and enjoy the episode. Know that anything said about these cases are just reiterations of the facts of the case and theories either given by other individuals that we explore or our own personal theories and opinions that hold no weight whatsoever because we are not detectives, we are not psychologists, and we are not doctors. That probably covers our ass enough, right? Let's find out together, shall we? Last week we left off praising Amy for her famous twists and turns, so let's just pick it up right back there.
Oh,
all right,
man.
M. Night Shyamalan, are you ready for another murder? Today I'm going to be sharing the investigation of the murder of William Sparkman Jr. At 6:15 p.m. on September 12th, 2009, this was pretty recent, a man named Jerry Weaver, along with his wife and their daughter Brittany, were heading to Hoskins Cemetery to visit the graves of some of his wife's family. This cemetery is in Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky, basically in the middle of nowhere. It's not an easy place to find. It's about 100 yards off of Arnett's Fork Road, which is already an out-of-the-way road as it is. I'm just trying to paint a picture of how in the middle of fucking nowhere this road is.
I appreciate it.
So here this family is heading to the cemetery, guns in hand, because no one goes out into the woods in Kentucky without protection.
Sure.
And Weaver spots a red pickup truck near the edge of a clearing and went to check it out. And as he walked around it, a figure came into view about 40 yards away, and it was a motionless, naked man hanging from a tree.
Mm.
So Weaver got his family out of there, obviously, called 911 and met a state trooper to show him where this body was. The man was slumped forward, his feet were on the ground, and his knees were hovering about half a foot above the ground, and he had a noose of white nylon rope around his neck that had been tossed over the branch above him, wrapped around a nearby tree, and tied off on a third tree. The man was wearing only socks. His wrists and ankles were bound with gray duct tape. A red rag was stuffed into his mouth, secured with tape, wrapped around his head. A U.S. Census Bureau ID card dangled from the tape next to his right ear.
What?
And scrawled across the man's chest, in ink from a black felt tip pen, were 3 giant letters, F-E-D, Fed.
For being a Census Bureau worker?
Right? The license plate on the red Chevy pickup matched the ID card. This man was 51-year-old William Sparkman Jr., who lived about 40 miles away in London, Kentucky. And I don't have to tell you how upset I am that I have to repeat London, Kentucky so many times.
Oh, yeah, I don't love it.
Paris,
I don't love
Texas.
that for you. Paris, Texas.
Cairo, Illinois.
It's pronounced
furious.
Cairo, and you know that.
Cairo. Kentucky State Police Detective Donald Wilson was put on the case. He had been a state trooper for 6 years, and just 2 days before this, he was promoted to detective, and this would be his first case, and what a doozy it is.
He really cut his teeth on something.
Really lucked out / did not luck out at
Yeah.
all, because this case took a long time to solve. So it actually, this case has a ton of details, and I really encourage people to read about it yourself to get an appreciation for how much investigation went into this. But I'm going to highlight some of the biggest moments from the case. So first and foremost, I want to touch on the area. So this is Appalachia.
Mm.
So for anyone who doesn't know about Appalachia, lawlessness is the best term I can use.
Yeah.
A history of lawlessness. Throughout the late 19th century, Clay County had a history of like grisly feuds between rival families. Do you know what I mean?
boy.
Like famous feuds. There were the Bakers versus the Howards, the Philpotts versus the Griffins, the Gerards versus the Whites. These were huge. They garnered national headlines. We have to have a rival family episode because some of these stories are buck wild.
I was like,
I do have to tell you, Ashley, that
really
I tried to
fascinating.
come on for a feud episode, and you said no.
Yeah, I
Ashley.
remember because I was like, I don't know if we can think of any. And then I just started thinking about how many feuds
There's
there
a
are and
million
how much I
feuds.
love drama. So next time we're doing
I
feuds.
mean, we just
the three
got
of us.
finished talking about how much we love the Housewives. That's basically what the feud episode would be.
You know,
all the
here's the
drama.
Yeah, I was
thing.
actually just thinking that.
Maybe I just wasn't into Housewives yet, and I didn't know how much I needed feuds.
Aw, you
Do you
needed
know what?
that
I think
appreciation.
everybody, if you need a reason to subscribe to the Patreon, we're going to do a feud episode.
Feuds. So,
Anywho.
Appalachia. Beyond that, and for anyone who's like, it's Appalachia. It's Appalachia.
It's Appalachia.
But you can also say Appalachia if you want.
No,
the people that live
Appalachia.
there will not enjoy it. But also, assassinations are really common in the area, especially around election times. This moves us kind of more in the 20th century. Newspapers describe this place as a hive of bloodshed and a place that didn't take kindly to the prying eyes of journalists and detectives, basically outsiders of any kind. A lot of people in the area are also known for their anti-government sentiments, and that's been on the rise the last few decades, especially when Obama got elected, and I don't think I have to tell you why.
Mhm.
No offense to any listeners from Kentucky or Appalachia. I, too, am from a place riddled with racism, but you have to call it like it is sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, they hate people from Hawaii there.
Yes, I don't have to tell you why. We all know how Appalachia feels about Hawaii. So at the time of Sparkman's murder, for example, Obama had been in office for 8 months. Glenn Beck had recently told his followers the time for silent dissent is long past. The Department of Homeland Security had warned of the growing potential of violence from domestic fringe groups growing out of right-wing extremism. And this was an area where if you show up on someone's porch as a stranger, you're likely to get a gun pointed at your face. Politicians and authority figures were referred to as crooks and liars. And it's also a place with a pretty large Fed presence due to the amount of meth labs, the opioid epidemic, and marijuana fields that were being busted constantly. So just walking into the investigation, this is the area in which the crime took place.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, Detective Wilson, he immediately went out to the scene of the crime. He saw the nakedness, the duct tape, the ID card, the word Fed on the chest. And he also noticed a trickle of blood had leaked out of Sparkman's right ear, which made him wonder if he had been struck. He also noted that the tape binding Sparkman's ankles was tightly wrapped, but the tape around his wrists was loose and full of kinks. Also, strangely, a separate strip of tape ran over the top of Sparkman's head, securing his glasses to his face. Other important things he noted about this particular crime scene: they found 3 red rags matching the one in Sparkman's mouth. They found a short length of rope apparently cut from the one used to hang him with. He noticed there was excess rope where the knot was secured to the second tree, suggesting it had been tied, then untied, tightened, and retied. The area around the body was undisturbed. There were no tire tracks from vehicles other than Sparkman's. Inside the bed of Sparkman's truck was a pile of clothes neatly folded, dress pants, a polo shirt, boxer briefs, basically everything he wasn't wearing, but no shoes and no wallet. And Detective Wilson noted that it was interesting the truck hadn't been disposed of because criminals in that area were known to burn vehicles to eliminate evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So next step was to go to Sparkman's house and try to find his cell phone because Nextel had said that his phone was either turned off or out of service. They couldn't pinpoint its location. So search warrant in hand, they headed out to his ranch house. Detective Wilson described the house as untidy, but no indication a struggle had taken place. There were cobwebs clinging to the walls and a layer of dust covering most of it. They found his dog, a Jack Russell Terrier, alive and well, with several bags of dog food, multiple of which were open, a brand new printer, but no computers. But that's really all they found. So at this same time, about 100 miles north of here, a forensic pathologist was performing the autopsy on William. The preliminary cause of death was asphyxiation, which everyone kind of guessed. There was no sign of trauma to the head, and the blood that had leaked out of his ear, it turned out, was the result of an insect infestation, which is the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yes.
Traces of the red fibers were found stuck to the duct tape on his wrists and ankles, and a lack of bruising around the taped areas led forensics to believe he had not struggled against the bindings, which was interesting, especially for the hands, because he was bound loosely, and that's where Detective Wilson theorized that they had loosened because he put up a fight or tried to escape, but no bruising, no struggle. Was he dead or unconscious before he was bound? Things were starting to not make as much sense.
Yeah.
In the truck, they found a laptop. Guys, in the truck, they found a laptop briefcase, but they never found a laptop. Also missing was his gun, wallet, and phone. Found his credit card holder, but no cards. There were no blood or other bodily fluids found. The dashboard and steering wheel held traces of red fibers, indicating the surfaces had been wiped down to eliminate fingerprints, and the fibers appeared to match the red rags found at the scene and in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So, because Sparkman had worked for the government and because he had the word Fed written on his chest, Detective Wilson thought it was a good idea to call the FBI, and he was correct. In fact, they were pretty pissed that he did not call them for 2 whole days.
Yeah, like, we should have been your first call.
So the FBI immediately opened a joint investigation with the state troopers. The following day, Sparkman's 20-year-old son Josh had shown up at the London police station with several documents, one of which being a just-in-case letter written by his father he had found in a filing cabinet. Well, it turns out William Sparkman had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2007, but had been cancer-free for the past year, and the letter basically was written back then and told Josh what he needed to do with the family's finances if he ever passed away.
Makes sense.
Which is a good idea to have
Yes.
something like that. Especially, he's 51.
Yeah,
like,
it's very responsible.
You need a will.
I honestly am always like, why don't I have one? Like, anything can happen and I have a child. So, yes, love it.
Yeah, everybody get on writing your wills except for me. I don't need to.
Write
Lauren,
your
you
wills.
need a will.
I do.
Yeah, Lauren,
I'm
you
being
need
an
a will.
idiot.
You
I
have a
know.
baby.
Listen.
You need life insurance, too. Call Joey.
I know. Actually, me and Alex have talked about that. When you
If
need
Joey
life
needs
insurance, call Joey.
Joe Oakes.
I think he needs a theme song. Okay, continue.
So the feds took over. They were a little bit more thorough. They went to Sparkman's house and found a couple interesting things, but nothing that like was a huge breakthrough. They found a scary fixed blade knife and a pair of black cargo pants in Josh's old bedroom, along with a syringe with an unknown substance in it. And like I said, none of these items really raised too many red flags until info started coming in about Josh. Apparently, he was a little bit of a misfit. He had a pretty rocky relationship with his father. He was adopted by Sparkman when he was 2, and he ended up being a high school dropout, ran with the wrong crowd, had trouble with drugs, wrecked multiple cars, and was known to scream at his father publicly, which is not great. And it seems, by the way people describe his clothing, he might have been goth.
Okay.
But I can't, there's no pictures or anything, so I just saw the phrase, his clothing reflected his rebelliousness. And
So
definitely
he looked
imagine
like
some
he listened to
eyeliner.
My Chemical Romance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
there was that line, and then there was the black cargo pants, and then they also noted that he had a shirt with bold letters that had 2 words on it, and the words were psychopath. But honestly,
Okay.
like, I'd wear that shirt.
Yeah.
I remember that
So-
shirt. I've
Yeah.
seen
I
that
don't-
shirt on
I can
people.
envision it in my
Yeah.
head. I was imagining of like a Thrasher shirt or something, but yeah, I'm feeling this vibe.
I don't know how much of a smoking gun that is. But so this is 4 days after the body was found, and now Josh is the first person of interest because they know he had a bad relationship with his dad. But I do want to backtrack and talk a bit about William Sparkman and Josh's relationship because obviously it definitely comes into play. So Sparkman adopted Josh in 1991 when he was 2, like I said. But he didn't fit the mold of a typical adoptive parent. He was 33, he was single, and at the time, a Boy Scout director stationed in Texas. The Boy Scouts were apparently a huge part of William's life. He loved books on compass use, coin collecting, knot tying. He had all the badges. All the badges.
He didn't mess around.
Not
And-
tying, you say?
Knot tying. He became a professional scout and went on to oversee scouting programs in several Florida counties as well. And throughout his life, he showed very little interest in dating. In fact, I can't find any record of him having a girlfriend or a boyfriend for that matter. He basically just followed the Boy Scouts around before moving to London, Kentucky. And after Sparkman was found dead, his mother and others closest to him immediately suspected Josh or his friends.
Yeah.
So that right there is like, why? Okay, if this kid, I mean, technically it's not this kid's grandmother, it's an adopted grandmother, but if the grandmother is like, it's him,
Yeah.
that seems a little weird.
I would believe
Okay,
the
but
grandmother
also-
if they're saying it's definitely this kid. Like, okay.
You guys have to remember there are lots of people who are like, adopted kids don't count.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
So his
That's fair.
grandmother, despite the fact that she should consider him to be her grandson, it's very
Mhm.
possible that she considered him to be her son's ward or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
she could still have
there-
always thought of him as an outsider and not accepted him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sparkman's
Anyway.
mother, I couldn't remember the last thing I said. His mother suspected Josh and his friends. Also, Sparkman had made Josh a beneficiary of one of his 2 life insurance plans, and this was laid out in his just-in-case letter to Josh, which, if Josh had read it prior to finding it after his dad's death, would mean he had a motive for murder.
Right.
So they go after Josh. They found out he worked and lived 125 miles southwest of London. He worked at a Church's Chicken, which is a fast food restaurant for anyone who's not from the Midwest or the South. And he claimed that Josh said he worked closing shifts every night the week of his father's death, except for the 12th, which was the day the body was found. And Josh also said his car had broken down earlier that week, and he was depending on friends to get around, so he hadn't left Cookeville the entire week. And his manager confirmed this. He had worked closing all week. He was there every single night till like 10 or 11 p.m. His roommate then was questioned. It was a 21-year-old girl named Gracie, who he apparently had met through a church group a decade earlier. They were best friends. She considered him a brother, like a little brother, and she confirmed Josh's car was undrivable and she had seen him every day that week. So he has a pretty airtight alibi. He's got like clock ins and clock outs.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right? So at the same time they're questioning Gracie, his roommate, a 20-year-old named Lowell Adams shows up at the police station in London, Kentucky. Because a day earlier, investigators stopped by his house and told his mom they would like to speak with him about Sparkman's death. Because it turns out Lowell's name was mentioned in the letter Josh had found. Sparkman had listed him as the beneficiary of his second insurance policy. According to Sparkman in his letter, he knew Lowell because sometimes Lowell would accompany him while he performed his census duties for, quote, backup.
Okay.
Because like I said, this area is dangerous. You don't just like go on people's porches and knock on their door, which is kind of a census worker's job.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But
Makes
that is
sense.
illegal. You're not allowed to do that as a census worker, but, you know, that's beside the point. That has nothing to do with
He was living
this guy's
fast
death.
and loose.
Yeah, you know.
He was, not following the rules.
So far,
So-
he's the most interesting census worker in the world.
That you've ever heard
Never
of.
heard an interesting story about a census worker. Oh, got me hooked.
So Lowell tells investigators, Lowell again, 20-year-old boy. Lowell tells investigators he had been good friends with Josh, Sparkman's son, until 10th grade when they started to drift apart. William Sparkman had become a friend of the family and even tutored Lowell in math. So for the past 2 years, Sparkman had been paying him like $7.25 an hour for security and navigational help while carrying out his census work. And like I said, this is a very much so a violation of official census policy. Lowell did say he was uncomfortable at first, but got used to it, and, you know, they didn't get caught, so he felt fine. Mm-hmm. He was asked about Sparkman's romantic life. Lowell said they'd never discussed it. Lowell said he'd last accompanied Sparkman on September 5th, exactly a week before he was found dead. On September 8th, Lowell had a missed call from Sparkman, who did not leave a message, and he never spoke to Sparkman again. The investigators didn't fully grasp Lowell's relationship with Sparkman, and they scheduled him for a polygraph later that week. Okay, so why Sparkman was doing census work. I got to get into this real quick. So he was involved with Boy Scouts, but he resigned from his post and started volunteering at his son's elementary school after he began attending. So this is Josh. He said he was determined to help Josh, who was struggling in the classroom, to succeed. And eventually he was offered a paying job as an instructional assistant, which was a position he ended up holding for 9 years. It paid garbage, but offered Sparkman the opportunity to work with kids, which he loved.
Okay.
He was always upbeat and eager to help students, and the students adored him. He was always on time, always willing to work extra shifts, always willing to help other teachers. He was genuinely liked.
He was a good guy.
But even so,
well,
Lauren, I think we've learned don't ever say that about
listen,
anybody.
I wanted to try and set up the story so that she could have a big twisty moment.
Is
I'm
that
sorry.
what you wanted?
So let's take that again. So he was a good guy.
Yeah, he sounds like it.
He was genuinely liked by people, but even so, the teachers at the school thought he was weird.
Oh, a weirdo.
He didn't seem to socialize with adults very well. He could appear distant and at times be very blunt. And he was described as the kind of person people would tread carefully around to not say the wrong thing to him.
Okay. Not great.
Again, never spoke about dating. His colleagues never knew him to ever date anyone. He was a homebody. He didn't go out. He didn't seem to have any friends. But anyway, in 2005, Sparkman started supplementing his income by working part-time for the Census Bureau.
Okay. Makes sense.
At this point, the investigation gets a little sidetracked because they get some bad intel. They got sent off investigating some local drug lord who had skipped town, but eventually they ruled it all out because the timelines didn't match up and the murder didn't match up. Like, locals in the area would have just shot a guy and thrown him in a body of water. They wouldn't have done this whole, like, send a message to the feds thing.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, it wasn't the MO of, like, the local
No,
misfits.
they would have just been like, get rid of it.
Yeah. And again, they would have burned the truck or they would have
Yes.
submerged it in water.
I'm with you.
So this is where the case takes a complete left turn. Like 100% curveball. No one could have seen it coming. Lowell Adams shows up to take his polygraph with the FBI 10 days later after his initial interview and basically says, like, can we talk? Like, basically, he said he had not been truthful with them the week before. He definitely did not have anything to do with his murder, but he did have information and he didn't want to fail the polygraph and be accused of something horrible because he was trying to hide this information he did have.
Oh, damn. What does Lowell know?
Fair enough.
Which is very valid. And
Yeah.
he told investigators that Sparkman had spoken with him several times about killing himself. In fact, the Saturday before he was found dead, he told Lowell he was going to do it that Wednesday, which is approximately when he would have died. He had been hanging for either 24 to 48 hours, depending on... I don't know if they ever actually got a time of death, but he was found on a Saturday, and they determined that he either did it on Wednesday or Thursday.
So they knew it had been a couple days, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had been there for a couple days. So... he said Sparkman had told him his cancer had returned, the drugs were not working, and he wasn't expected to make it beyond October. He told Lowell he wanted to commit suicide to spare himself the agony of dying of cancer, and he said he had it all planned out. He picked a place in Clay County. He told him he was going to throw a rope around a tree, attach cinder blocks to his feet, and hurl himself down a hill. So he was going to find a tree next to a hill and throw the cinder blocks off and along with his own body and hang himself.
Okay.
He also told him he'd already practiced asphyxiating himself by putting bags over his head and even once trying it with a rope. He told Lowell he was pretty sure he couldn't do it all on his own, and he had asked for Lowell's help, in which Lowell refused. That Saturday, 1 week before he died, or 1 week before he was found dead, he had asked Lowell to get drunk with him later in the day, and he picked up a case of Budweiser, and this was confirmed by a receipt that was found. Lowell turned him down.
Damn, Lowell.
Lowell was like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, don't even talk to me. Don't even be telling me this shit.
I mean, that's fair.
I
He
would
said-
feel very similarly, but
I know.
also
Very similarly.
I mean, 'cause
it would be
it's like-
hard to turn a guy down, though, when he's like, I'm about to die. Drink Budweiser with me. I'd be very torn.
Yeah, but if that guy had also said, like, I'm going to make it look like a murder, I'd be like, then don't
no,
even
you're right.
lose my
You're right.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair. Yes.
Lose my
So-
number. Yeah.
Lose my
my number. Forget my name.
Well, Lowell he said he turned him down because he was concerned people might think that either he was in on it, which is fair, or that they were engaged in homosexual activity, which he was
Oh.
very emphatic about that was not the case, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
But we'll come back
Okay.
to that.
Yeah. All right.
Well, it was rural Kentucky. So.
Yes.
Well, true. That's true. So they didn't actually suspect Lowell. He seemed truthful, although they could not administer the polygraph right away because apparently, because they spoke with him for so long beforehand, it could render inaccurate results. I'm actually super impressed by the investigation, like the
Yeah.
investigators on this case.
Yeah.
And not just wanting to wrap it up by whatever means necessary. I have seen way too many true crime documentaries to know that there are investigators that would have put him under a polygraph right there and not cared that if he
exactly.
fit, that
And
he
just
failed.
been like, here's the results, the end.
Yeah. And they also said that Lowell didn't describe every last detail of what happened. He even got some things wrong, like the cinder blocks and stuff. Like, that's not how he ended up doing it. So
Right.
they didn't believe they could place him at the scene even if they wanted to without evidence. So, but he took a polygraph 8 days later and he passed. And Josh, his son, also took a polygraph and passed. And both of them had alibis that checked out.
All right.
So,
I'm scared.
once they started to look at this case as a suicide, things started to make more sense. Sparkman's home was in foreclosure. They found out he was about $50,000 in debt. That even though Josh had been known to scream at him and treat him like shit and walk all over him, he still gave him money for stuff all the time, bailing him out of jail, buying him food, putting money on his prepaid Walmart credit card, etc. So he was still would do whatever his son asked him to do.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't have the money to do it. He had just kicked Josh out for good, which is when he moved in with Gracie after Josh had been arrested for receiving a stolen gun from a friend and was placed on house arrest. Definitely seemed like Josh was up to no good, but he had airtight alibi, so it doesn't seem like he did it.
Yeah.
Sparkman had just worked his way through school. He wanted to get a full-time position at a school and get paid actual money to teach, but even though he got a degree, he couldn't find a job. He was really excited because a math teacher position had opened up at a high school near his house, and he applied, and he told all his colleagues about it and how he's going to get this job, blah, 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 blah. And then the position was given to someone else. And from what I read, he did not hide his disappointment, but I don't know what that means. Was he sullen, angry, sad? Yeah. I don't know. Mad?
Was he setting fires about it?
Was he setting fires? What was happening?
How angry was he?
But yeah, all of this, in debt, losing his home, unable to get the work he wanted, his relationship with his son was deteriorating even further. They had now a bit of a motive for suicide.
Yeah.
So forensics started to put more together too. For example, it was noted that he had a fractured bone in his neck that was almost healed, a sign that an injury had occurred in the past and had nothing to do with his death, which supported Lowell's claim that Sparkman had practiced suffocating himself. Once before.
Okay.
The loose tape on the hands started to make sense because he was having to do a lot of work with his hands taped together.
Yep.
And therefore, it would have loosened a bit, but not caused bruising because it wasn't a struggle. It was just his hands were moving around. They also took a closer look at the lettering on his chest. This is actually brilliant. A woman named Emily Craig was called in. She was a renowned forensic anthropologist, and she was tasked with reviewing this case. And she was also a professional illustrator. So she noticed a mark at the top of the letter E on his chest that looked to her to be what illustrators referred to as a bead, which is essentially a drop of ink that appears at the end of a marker stroke. And at the bottom of that same letter, she noticed the black ink was evenly dispersed, which signals the start of the stroke. And the other letters, upon closer investigation, had the same features. So that determined, that indicated that the letters on his chest had been drawn upside down.
I love people that are this smart to know those things. That someone can come in and see where the stroke started. Yeah. So it looked like he had written it on himself.
But
he wrote it
is
himself.
not a handwriting analyst because that's nonsense.
No. This had everything to do with the ink.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But we've debunked it. So no more handwriting analysis.
No.
And also no more polygraphs, guys.
Oh, polygraphs drive me nuts.
I think that they can both be good tools to use, but definitely not concrete evidence of anything.
No. You can't solve a crime based
no more
solely
polygraphs.
on those.
Throw them in the ocean.
So he wrote Fed on his own chest. They also took his glasses to the Walmart where he had them prescribed and found out they were made to correct 2400 vision.
Okay.
Wait,
hello?
What?
2400.
Good
What
morning.
even is that?
It you can barely read the E.
At the top of the chart.
At the top of the chart.
I mean, I've never heard it go up that high.
Me neither. I even Googled it.
Ended at 10.
No.
I Googled
oh my God.
it because
you
I
can
was
be
like,
so
I wonder
bad.
if this is. Yeah, I was like, I wonder if this is a mistype, a typo. It's supposed to be 2040. No, 2400 vision is a thing, and he had it.
Isn't that basically legally blind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he, without his glasses, completely blind.
Yeah, okay.
2400 vision, so that also answered a piece of the puzzle. Why were his glasses taped to his head? He wouldn't have been able to pull this off without his glasses. So he taped them to his own head. And from there, all the DNA found at the scene belonged to Sparkman. And now the ropes and the body positioning started to make sense too. The fact that one rope had to be tied and untied a few times and cut shorter showed that the height had to be adjusted, which if someone else was hanging him, they could have adjusted it while he hung.
Right.
But he had to go test it and go like, oh, nope, too short. So he had to go and retie it. And investigators pointed out his feet were on the ground. So if he had wanted to save himself, all he would have had to do is stand up.
Yep.
And he could have saved
unless
himself.
he had been passed out.
Unless he had been passed out or forced. But again,
and his hands
no trauma
were behind
whatsoever.
him?
No, his hands were taped in front of him.
Oh.
Yeah.
And just no sign of struggle at all, really?
No.
Okay.
No bruising, no sign. Even the taped parts, there was no sign of struggle. And the toxicology reports, there was nothing in his blood. So he hadn't been drugged in any way. And he hadn't been beaten. So when all is said and done, this case was ruled a suicide, even though we have a ton of questions still, because his doctors, for example, told investigators his cancer wasn't back. He had received no news that he was terminal or his cancer had returned.
Liar.
So some people question what Lowell said as truth, and honestly the whole Lowell thing in general, and there are some theories. First of all, seems that the reason he wanted to stage it as a murder was pretty simple. He wanted life insurance policies to pay out to his son and Lowell, which they didn't, by the way, because after this death was ruled a suicide,
right,
they don't get that money.
Man.
Also, after talking to Joe Oakes, my fiance, about life insurance policies.
Never heard of him.
No,
your former fiance.
He's pretty nice. Yeah, my former fiance until I found this new guy in Colorado.
She does have a new soulmate.
So I was telling Joe this story, and he was like, oh yeah, you can't just assign a random person to your policy as a beneficiary. They have to be a family member, you have to be married into the family, or an employee or something. So this makes sense. Well, he was paying Lowell.
Okay.
He was paying Lowell technically under the table, but yeah, he was employing him to be his quote-unquote security. He needed a reason to put his name on the policy, but why even leave him an insurance policy? Who the fuck is this 20-year-old to him?
That makes me think they were having a relationship.
Well, one theory put forth that makes all the puzzle pieces seem to fit together, at least for me, is that Sparkman could have been a pedophile.
Ooh. Yeah.
Because if you think about
and
it,
all the working with kids. Ooh.
Yeah. Okay. So former altar boy, which not all altar boys were abused.
Some
but
were.
Then decades with the Boy Scouts, which I learned is as rife with pedophilia as the Catholic Church is.
Yeah.
So
he
bad.
was moved around with them a lot, which is something I found that the organization did with members who were accused of sexual abuse when I studied the Shakespeare case. The fact that he quit his job to become a volunteer at his son's school could have been because he was afraid his son would say something to his adopted son, by the way. The single guy adopts this 2-year-old boy, and as soon as he starts school, he quits his paying job to volunteer at the school to help his kid who's struggling in school.
Yeah,
if he's always lurking around, his son wouldn't feel safe to say anything.
Yeah.
To anyone.
Did Josh ever say whether or not his dad?
Mm-mm.
I mean, it would explain a lot more of the horrible behavior.
Right. Yeah, his son obviously hated his father.
Because obviously you the Boy Scouts thing was always suspicious because the Boy Scouts are the worst. So I was kind of I don't love that. But yeah, the fact that he treated his dad like absolute trash.
Yeah,
it seems like he hated him
kept
for
giving
something.
him money and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's it could be very much that he felt really guilty about what he had done, or Josh was straight up blackmailing him.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously not every single Boy Scout leader is a pedophile.
No.
That's not the assumption that I'm making. It's just adding it all up together makes me suspicious, especially from what we know about the Scouts as an organization. If you're listening and you were in the Scouts and you had a great time and you loved it and you didn't get molested, please don't take offense. It's just a fact that sexual assault is rampant in that organization, especially back in the day. And there are a few parts of this man's story and history that don't jive. I mean, Josh had like pretty lengthy behavioral issues.
Right.
The other teachers admitting they talked about him and all agreed he was kind of strange. No relationships at all, aside from a 20-year-old guy named Lowell who was so adamant that they weren't in a sexual relationship. And if you remember, his relationship with Lowell started because Lowell was one of Josh's friends. Mm-hmm, and then Sparkman became a friend of Lowell's family and then sort of weaseled his way in, becoming his tutor when he was 14.
Oof,
and now he's like paying him this money to ride around with him and leaves him an insurance policy. It just like, it doesn't make sense. And then the fact that he threw away his computer and phone and they never found them.
Right.
They are undoubtedly burned up or like tossed in a lake somewhere in Kentucky. So if there was any evidence of pedophilia or child porn, that's where they would have found it.
Absolutely. He was covering up.
Obviously, this could be way off, and all of these things are completely circumstantial. But even when I was reading the breakdown of this case, before I thought about researching theories, so many of these things popped out at me in this story that made me question Sparkman as being this, like, good guy who...
Right. Now, again, this is like the twist that I was talking about earlier. Like, now that we are backtracking and going over everything that he did, and even going back to that moment where you were like, Lowell was very adamant, like, we did not have a relationship.
Yeah. I didn't want to drink beer with him because
I
didn't want people to think I was gay.
But the fact that he had to say that over and over again, like, yes, again, it is Kentucky, and maybe you just think you have to say that. But there's a part of me that thinks maybe he was overly defensive because something had happened and he was feeling so much shame and fear. It's like all of that adds up in the end. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know,
Ashley,
man. Yeah.
The assignment was solved.
Yeah, I don't feel like this is solved.
He killed himself.
I have many questions.
You did not understand the assignment.
Nope, you did us wrong because I am left with more questions.
Off the rails.
The case is solved.
You're right. Technicality, though.
The reason that he killed himself, I mean, there's a ton. Like, say he was not a pedophile at all. I mean, he was obviously going through a really, really shitty time. Like, falling out with his son, in debt, money problems, worked his way through school and then couldn't get a job. Like, he was obviously upset.
Yeah.
With the state of things. There was just a lot of things with this case that made me question, like, is that why he killed himself?
Yeah.
But yeah, he nothing to do with feds. Nothing to do with the feds. Nothing to do with drugs.
Yeah, because nobody is like, fuck the U.S. Census takers. They show up on my porch every 9.5 years. I fucking hate it.
Like, you never hear about Census Bureau people.
No.
Being brutally murdered. If you show up at my door one more time, I swear. Oh my God.
And like, the people in the area were very anti-Fed because the feds were busting so many drug rings and drug lords and drug whatever. But yeah, like, he was a census worker.
Yeah.
He wasn't a Fed.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of trying to paint his murderer, if he did that, like they were a fucking idiot, but they obviously kind of knew what they were doing. If he did, I don't know.
I was actually, usually when we cover cases, true crime and stuff on this show, this was the first time I ever got to cover anything where the investigators were doing like a really good job.
It is so rare that we say that, but I am totally with you. It feels like they really were doing a good job, and they were like going over every detail.
Arresting the wrong people.
No. And they were trying to do the polygraph accurately. Like, you can appreciate that because it sucks.
Coming out of rural Kentucky, Appalachia, again, no offense. I'm from around the same area. I'm just saying. And, like, conducting this investigation and, like, some of the things that they linked up in their brain was really impressive. And I was just, like, happy to tell a story where it wasn't like, and the investigators are horrible, and they fucked this up and they fucked that up. No, they actually did a good job.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, make me sad again, Lauren.
Well, listen. Everybody.
What?
I feel like anytime we do something true crimey on this show, I am known to do like the most depressing and horrific things ever. But I actually like I have a happy ending to my story, you guys. For once in my
so
damn
glad you're
life.
Going last.
When you said the order that things were going at the beginning of the episode, I was sort of like, oh, good, because mine, I think, is going to be the most joyful. I usually have the longest notes and the most depressing story, but I have the shortest notes and a happy story. So it's a new me, everybody.
Nice.
Okay. But there is...
Take that 2022. We're coming for you.
That. I'm changing. Okay, but the beginning is sad, of course, because, you know, here we are. It starts out as a case, so you know it's coming. But I also have an abduction story, but a little bit different from what Amy told us in part 1. We're heading to the 80s.
Thank God.
There is a sweet little girl named Monica Bonilla, who was the daughter of Guillermo Ruiz Bonilla and a woman named Rosemary Levi. They were living in Los Angeles, in the Valley, in Burbank, so close to home for me and Ashley. And according to Rosemary, the mom, her and Guillermo had a very normal, happy relationship in the 70s. They had their child together. It hits 1980. She's 5 years old. Everything had been going fine, but Guillermo suddenly began to change and get more aggressive. And it was like 1980 leading into 1981. His behavior began to change radically after the murder of John Lennon in 1980, which happened in December at the end of the year.
Interesting.
One day
What an odd... Okay.
No, it is. Yeah. It's so weird, and what's funny is like this has nothing to do with the mystery, but it's like why he became an asshole, which I think is so weird.
Yeah.
His behavior it changed. As soon as the assassination happened, he woke up a few days later and said, "John is reincarnated in my body. I am John Lennon."
I mean, that makes sense. John Lennon was a garbage person.
So, you know, yeah, it seems like him and Guillermo, to be honest, like probably would have been buds. But he just wakes up and says this one day, and it's like, hey, we've talked about reincarnation on the show. We like to, you know, believe in these things, but I don't know. I'm not digging Guillermo in this moment, and Rosemary just seems like the sweetest little lady.
I mean, here's the thing. If he did, prove it.
Yeah, I'm going to need a little more evidence here.
Sing a song, my man.
He didn't have it. Exactly. I'm sure at one point Rosemary was like, okay, you're going to need to give me a little bit more. But he just kept saying, nope, John Lennon's in my body, and you're just going to have to buy it. So this sweet woman is just like, excuse me, like trying to get any information out of him. But instead he just becomes this angry, distant, like horrible man. He did. I know. After Amy was like, "Well, John Lennon sucks."
Maybe John Lennon did. John Lennon did hit women.
Well, yeah. Actually, I'm believing more and more this guy's telling the truth. But either way,
we don't know. But go on.
It ruined Rosemary's life.
But we do know he did. He was him.
Yeah,
we do know for sure that he was John Lennon. So he was
100% science.
He starts making Rosemary's life hell. He becomes a horrible person. He does everything he can to look like him. He grows his beard out, lets his hair grow long, purchased all the clothing and accessories, just completely takes on the John Lennon lifestyle. It is consuming his life. Rosemary and their sweet little 5-year-old daughter, by the time it hits 1980, she's 5, she's adorable. He's just not paying any attention to them. He's a monster. And according to Rosemary, Guillermo's changes just made things worse for their marriage. There was nothing she could do anymore. They had nothing in common. She couldn't even talk to him. Like their family
She's like, I don't even like the Beatles.
I'm not a fan of the band. I don't.
It would be different. I'm a Rolling Stones girl.
She wanted no part of Beatlemania. She had to get out of there. Yeah, they had nothing left in common. So she was like, listen, you might have John Lennon in your body, but I have to get out of here. So they decide to get a divorce, and she is fighting for full custody of Monica, as she should.
Why?
Yes, because this guy's nuts. But on September 22nd, 1982, Rosemary comes home from work, and she finds their Burbank home completely empty. They were missing all of their furniture. Every possession, even the light fixtures were taken out. Things are ripped out of the walls.
What?
It is left completely bare. She also came back to see the only items left in the house were like wedding pictures and wedding, items like candlesticks, things. Everything was completely destroyed and broken. Looked like they had been thrown against a wall, smashed with a sledgehammer. So the only thing she did have were anything related to their wedding day left behind. But everything else was taken out of walls. And the biggest thing to have gone missing, her daughter, Monica. There was no sign of Monica anywhere, but also no sign of Guillermo, who had still been living there as they're trying to figure things out. Both of them had vanished without a trace. The next day, during all of the search, obviously she immediately contacts the police and the search is on, the investigation is on. But the next day, one of Guillermo's relatives contacts Rosemary and simply says, without any other clues, "You will never see Monica again." They introduced themselves. I couldn't find which relative it was. It sounds like it was one of his siblings, but they simply said, "I would never."
John.
It was John Lennon. Said
Paul.
Ringo Starr.
Ringo.
It was
available.
Ringo Starr.
What else was he doing?
He said, "You will never see Monica again," and then hung up. She was left with nothing, no
Jesus.
clues, no useful information, just the news that her 5-year-old daughter was gone forever. And she now, of course, was suspecting it already, but now knows for sure that Guillermo has her because of this relative contacting her. So this is what's crazy. It's an abduction, but it's a parental abduction, a parental kidnapping, as the authorities would call it. And so you'd think, okay, well, we can figure this out because we know who the person is.
We know who took her.
This isn't a full mystery, but he truly vanishes without a trace. And like, this is the 80s. We don't have all of the technology that we do now. And they couldn't find this guy. There were just not enough clues. Even with the way he left their home, it was just like, because he took everything and, they're not like finding all of the little, I don't know. I can't even explain what I'm trying to say, but there's just no way to like even swab the area to be like, oh, well, this is a clue to this and that. I don't know.
They just know who took her.
Oh, and so
it's just
she
a matter
wouldn't
of
have had photos of her daughter, so she couldn't even put it on the news to be like, bring this kid back.
Yes. It's like, we know exactly who has her, but where did they go? And like, the world is at their fingertips. We have no idea where they've gone.
Are they even in the country?
Totally. So she's just left feeling completely hopeless that her daughter is gone. And then even more painful, 2 months later, a judge awarded Rosemary custody of Monica that she had been fighting for.
Cool.
But her daughter is missing. So it's just like the biggest slap in the face of like, thank you, but where the hell is she?
Thanks, but I don't know where she is.
Yeah. I like that it took 2 months
I know.
for them to be like, hey, guess what? And she's like, this could have happened about 2 months and a day ago.
I really needed this a long time ago, assholes. But there's our justice system working for us.
Well, the thing is, though, is that like she was willingly letting him stay with them while he looked for another place to stay. So I don't think that it would have mattered to him if he had custody or not of the kid.
I mean, you're right. It's like he was in their life enough, and Guillermo fucking sucks. And she was too kind. She was giving him extra chances and letting him, come and go as he pleased and stay with them. And it's like she was being too kind. So she is awarded custody. She's fucking pissed. She's praying every day, staying hopeful. Sweet Rosemary is like, I'm going to find my daughter. At least we know she's with Guillermo. She could be literally anywhere, but I am holding out hope.
And at least you can hold out hope that he won't harm her in any way, too.
You hope that.
Because it's
like
her
you're
father.
The dad.
I mean,
you hope that.
I was going to say, we just heard 2 stories in which fathers aren't super great to their kids.
Right.
So, like, maybe not. But that is something you can at least, like, hang on to.
I think she was hoping for that, even though he had become a monster in the last 2 years, because like 1980 was when things really switched with his personality, and then 1982 is when he left, and she's like, okay, yeah, this guy sort of went off the rails in the last couple of years, but he is the father, so like maybe she is safe somewhere. But again, that is why these cases with parental kidnappings are so wild, because you know who did it, but it took 8 years, just over 8 years.
8 years!
For anything to happen. In the time since the kidnapping, she did remarry because, I mean, she had been checked out of the marriage for a couple of years already. But In the time, even though she was mourning and she was searching, she did find love throughout it, someone who could support her during the time. So she did get remarried and had a son with this new man named Dorian, and in the time spent over $20,000 searching for Monica endlessly. But there were no leads in the case for over 8 years, like absolutely nothing. Nobody knew where he was. The family members were staying like tight-lipped, everything. But then this is like a crazy thing that happened. On November 21st, 1990, 8 years later, the show Unsolved Mysteries featured a segment about a 4-year-old girl named Nylene Marshall, who mysteriously disappeared while picnicking with her family in Helena, Montana. As a result of this broadcast, hundreds of viewers called into the call center with tips and clues and whatever they thought. One of the calls was a school official in Vancouver. The official believed that one of her students was Nylene, living in Point Roberts, Washington, which is near the Canadian border. So they thought this person was living in Washington, but coming over the border to this school in Vancouver. But they were very sure that Nylene was living under a fake name. So every day, a 12-year-old girl named Marianne Kelly was driven to school in Vancouver by her father, Robert Kelly. Most people who came in contact with this man, Robert Kelly, thought he was incredibly suspicious, just so shady, so off. They noted he was difficult.
He kept telling people he was a Beatle.
He was like, I really love the Beatles.
And we were like, you're Mexican. There's no way you're a Beatle.
You are not a white man. You're have to get out of here. Nothing adds up.
Yoko Ono wouldn't give you the fucking time of day.
You couldn't get Yoko if you
can't
tried.
write a song to save your life. Anyways, go on.
Fuck off, Robert. Super suspicious. They noted he was difficult to contact. He had no telephone number where he could be reached. Anytime he was asked for an address, he would say he was between addresses, but said that for years.
Classic
lie. School officials were also concerned because of what Robert would do when he dropped Marianne off at school. According to her teacher, when she would come into the classroom, he would stand at the window, that tiny little window in classroom doors, and watch Marianne through the windows for almost the entire first period to make sure that she stayed there. And what they thought was watching like who she would talk to, kind of seeing what she was going to tell. So his behavior was frightening the teacher. It was frightening all staff members, basically. And after this broadcast came out about the missing 4-year-old girl, the teachers began to say, I think this Marianne girl is actually Nylene Marshall. So school officials contact the FBI, who put Marianne and Robert Kelly under surveillance. The agents also reviewed her school records and discovered that they had been completely faked. These people were not who they said they were. There was no background to support anything that they wrote down. But the agents wanted to be careful not to spook Robert, that, they're on to him. So they're still keeping their distance till they gather enough evidence, but they're finally able to get a search warrant and say, like, okay, now we have the time. Let's bust in there. So it's December of 1990. FBI agents arrived at the Kelly home with their search warrant. They bust in, the house was searched extensively, and eventually, in a closet, they find a box labeled bathroom articles, and inside was a photo album with pictures of Guillermo, Monica, and Rosemary, along with Monica's birth certificate, proving who she is. So it became clear to investigators that Marianne Kelly was not the suspected Nylene that the whole school thought, but instead Monica Bonilla, which I think is wild because they did find a missing girl, but it was the wrong girl.
A different missing girl.
Yes.
Well,
which it's like, it's wonderful in one way.
What
like,
about Nylene, though?
I agree. I'm not saying like fuck Nylene.
Yeah, you're like, I'm so happy, but I just thought it was nuts. Yeah, something came out of the search, but it's like, whoa, this isn't even the girl we thought, even though everything kind of pointed to this Nylene Marshall girl because the age was very close. A lot of the details just made sense. But this mistaken identity led investigators to Monica Bonilla. It's Banana Town, but thank God they found someone. So Guillermo, who had been posing as Robert Kelly for the last several years, was arrested in Washington state, and he agreed to surrender himself finally after hours and hours of questioning and trying to, come up with every excuse. He did say he would be sent back to Los Angeles and he would surrender himself to LA authorities to face his charges of parental kidnapping. So he went back. He's going to be in prison basically forever. Monica told authorities that she was treated well by her father. And now maybe Guillermo was...
Except for that he wouldn't fucking leave her alone ever.
He wouldn't.
Get a life, bro.
Like the way he spied on her in the classroom. And like, but now even, I wasn't thinking this before, but after Ashley's story, there is a part of me that wonders, like, was he doing anything shady to her? The fact that he had to hover over her and make sure she wasn't talking, it could have been.
Well, I mean, it could have
solely
been
because
like,
of the
don't tell
identity.
anyone that my name is really this or that your name is really that.
yes.
But she was,
She was 5 at the time of the kidnapping and wasn't put
Yeah,
into
she might not even
school
remember.
until she was 11 or 12. And then she was found when she was 13. So yeah, I'm sort of like, she might have been too young to remember. And Monica revealed, she said, I was treated well by my father and I always felt loved, but I was told that my mother was dead and that's why we had to move away. So he was basically saying, your mother died and she was a horrible person. So she is now having this horrible vision of her dead mother, thinking like, oh, she was toxic and we had to escape and now she's dead and I'll never have a relationship with her, like believing all these false things. And so I don't know. I just wonder, I hope that was it, because that already fucking sucks. I hope that there wasn't like any other kind of abuse, but just after the stories we heard today, now I'm so worried. But I don't know. She never admitted to any of that. I don't know what she remembers from when she was young, but either way, she believed her mother was dead and she was a horrible person. So she just sort of believed and went with whatever her father said. But she was over the moon when she found out her mother was alive and she got to be reunited with her, because the very faint memories she did have were of this loving, wonderful person. So that's why she, you know, her world was turned upside down when her dad tried to tell her otherwise. So they got to be reunited, because even though her mother, Rosemary, her and her new husband and her son, Dorian, they were not very well off. And she had said, like, hey, I want to go find my daughter up in Washington State, but I can't afford the flight to go up there. But one of the investigators said, I will pay for your flight because you're going to meet your daughter, which was actually very sweet.
That's sweet.
So they flew her out to Washington. They got to be reunited on December 22nd, 1990. It was a beautiful reunion. Monica was so stoked to meet Dorian, her half-brother. It was this lovely moment. Rosemary said she hadn't celebrated Christmas since her daughter went missing over 8 years ago, but was finally excited to have a real holiday all together with both her kids and her new husband, which is so sweet. So they actually had a very happy ending. Guillermo is rotting in prison. This family has been reunited, and from any of the updates I could find is still like good to go. They apparently went to some like intensive counseling because obviously Monica was not well and neither was Rosemary. But it actually seems like we have a happy ending here. And
Thank God.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The one sad news I have to say, Nylene has never been found. Her case is still open. So I just wanted to say that. That's the one sad part. Nylene has been missing since 1983 when she was 4 years old. She went missing while in the mountains camping with her family in Montana. If anyone has any information, come forward with it. But we otherwise had a semi-happy story. And that's my tale.
Wow. I can't believe. Here's the thing. If Joe woke up tomorrow and was like, I'm John Lennon, 2 years? No.
I can't believe that she sort of
No.
tried to work it out with him for 2 years, which we don't know the whole story. Those
2
details
weeks,
aren't out
maybe.
there. But the fact that the
Also-
custody battle and the divorce didn't start happening till 1982, I'm like, no, that would last about 2 months for me, and then I'd have to go.
I'd be like, all right, you need to snap out of this fucking John Lennon bullshit real quick.
Yeah.
And Ashley, you need to watch out for that because Joey loves the
He
Beatles.
loves the Beatles. He
It's
loves
true.
He
them.
fucking loves the Beatles.
Any day he could wake up and tell me he's a Beatle, and I'm just gonna have to deal with that.
Yeah. Hopefully he's one of any of them besides John.
I know.
Hopefully he's Ringo.
I was just going to say, you got to hope for Ringo. George Harrison
Yeah,
doesn't
he's
seem
so
so
sweet.
bad.
George, yeah.
George seems
George-
all right.
100%.
George had the best solo career, in my opinion.
I can get with
So-
that.
I mean, I would
Well-
I would agree with your opinion as far as quality.
I was going to
is
say
concerned.
quality. As far as success, I
Not
mean,
like
Sir
success,
Paul.
of course.
We have to say Sir Paul, but
He is
I love me some
the
George
most
Harrison.
successful.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
You know what's really good? Those Linda McCartney vegetarian frozen meals.
Are they
Really?
good?
That to me is the most successful. Yeah, because I used to be vegetarian. I would eat those, and I was like, "Look, this is pretty good. This is really good fake chicken."
Okay, Linda. I see you. I'm here for it.
So thank you, Paul, for, probably funding that.
Yeah, thanks
we
for
appreciate Paul's
funding
Because I am
financial.
assuming
vegetarian nuggets.
I am assuming that if she had just been like a random person and she was like, hey, I have a meal thing that I want to do, they would have been like, no, we're good. But because
Join
she
the
was like,
club.
my husband is, I don't know if you've heard of the Beatles, but he is one of them. And they were like, oh, great. We'll put you in every grocery store in town.
Give me those beefless burgers.
We're here for it, Linda. We love it.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. I didn't know she was dead. Well,
I was just about to say I didn't know she was dead, and thank you, Amy, for your education. Okay.
Amy, did you make that up? Is she dead?
She has been dead for, I want to say, like 20 years? 15, 20 years?
Jesus.
Okay. Well, geez, where have I been living?
Yeah, she died in 1998.
Well, Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Where have I been?
I'm sorry, I didn't know that there was a new mystery that was solved.
Well, me and Ashley have to go lay flowers at her grave because this is a new thing. Also, wait, I know this is a total side note, but I just found this out because of the Netflix documentary. Did anybody else know that Bob Ross was dead?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I
never mind then.
assumed, but I didn't. I never really thought about it.
I just, there's a new documentary, which we like to plug docs on the show. Watch the Bob Ross documentary because Happy Little Tree Man has like a little bit of a dark story, but I did not know that he was dead. And when they said it on the doc, I nearly fell out of my chair. So I just had to ask. All right.
I thought that Christian Slater was dead.
You did, and I'm not sure why.
And
but I
then
support
all
you.
of a sudden I saw an ad for Dr. Death and his face was on it. And I was like, I thought he died.
But weren't you thinking of Patrick Swayze?
I thought you really liked Christian Slater.
I have zero feelings for or against Christian Slater.
Okay.
I take it back. I thought you were a big Heathers fan, I guess.
Oh, I mean,
gosh.
it's great.
Love Heathers.
But yeah, I never really had anything. I wasn't a Slater head.
One of our listeners pointed out when you posted that in the Facebook group that you were probably thinking of Patrick Swayze, which honestly broke my heart even more that you would confuse the two of them.
Well, no, I thought maybe Patrick Swayze or what's his name from Twister?
Oh, Bill Pullman.
Bill Pullman.
I love that me and Amy knew that right away. It's Paxton.
No, Paxton.
It is Paxton, but
So
we both
was
Pullman is still alive.
Bill
Pullman's alive.
Wait, so is Bill Paxton.
Hold on. No, Bill Paxton's dead.
Bill Paxton died?
Bill Paxton is dead.
No.
Yeah.
You're lying.
Yes.
How'd he die?
Oh my God. Why are we making this even more sad?
Because
than it
I have
was?
questions.
Hey, do you guys want to hear a list of people who are dead?
Somebody tell me how Bill Paxton died because I don't believe you. Titanic and Twister
heart
are
attack.
two of
He
my
had heart
favorite
attack,
movies.
yeah.
Oh my God. I have to go lay flowers on his grave.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wait, who was he in Titanic?
He
At the
was
beginning of the
guy- he
movie
wasn't
when he's
on the
talking to
Titanic.
Granny.
He was the
wasn't on it.
guy, yeah.
He's in the present day
that's
crew.
Right. I was like picturing him in an old-timey mustache.
No,
No.
he's in the
I was
present
actually just
day.
picturing him from Tombstone,
Oh God!
but on Titanic.
No,
Yeah, Lauren,
Bill
he died
Paxton.
in 2017.
Man,
Guys, this has been a
Lauren,
real
you know who
whirlwind
else
of
is dead?
emotions.
Is Oscar Wilde. I don't want to blow your mind.
I will murder
Princess
you.
Diana died as well.
Oh, she did.
Oh,
I
man.
just guys.
All
Okay,
right.
we should
well,
move on.
That's all the time we have this week for Keep It Weird. If anyone has any more information on celebrities who's died that we're not sure have
I'm
died,
crying,
just
laughing
send those
over
in,
here.
please. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening every week. And thank you, Amy, for joining us and
We
for
love
being a part of
you.
our
Of
Patreon.
Course,
We
thank
love
you for having me.
Everyone
being
should join the Patreon so you can listen to Amy every week. The show is called Keep
Every
It
month.
Weird. Every month.
Yes.
Every month. The show's called Keep It Beard. It's really, really fantastic. We do little short, not short. I mean, the episodes are an hour
I was gonna
long,
say you
but
still make.
we do
great
little
content.
snippets of weird stories that don't make it on the big show.
Amy's the
The big
best.
show,
You
the
should
weekly
all
show.
be a patron if you're cool. That was a terrible ad.
Yeah,
Just cut that
and-
out.
Sometimes Lauren hops on,
I do.
and those
And
are,
sometimes Lauren's
I'm
there.
not going to lie, those are, I feel like, our best episodes.
Those are some good episodes.
All right, they're good.
Yeah.
too.
Amy, do you have anything to plug? I mean, are you even on Instagram anymore? Did you bail? Did you abandon ship?
Hansel Pants?
At Hansel Pants?
Yeah, I think my Instagram's private.
Aww.
Well, follow her.
I think the last time I posted something was like July of 2020.
Well,
all right. So basically, if you want to know about Amy's life, you have to join the Patreon. So.
You have to join the Patreon, and also then you can listen to the episodes with Joe, which is called "Keep It Seared," which I'm actually going to take credit for because I named it.
Amy
you did,
and Joe hates it, and that
honestly,
makes me happy.
So yeah, I was like, your title is genius, and I love that Joe is against it. It makes it a little better.
Lauren and her sister are starting to take over a couple months of bonus episodes now that Joe and I have our own podcast. So you have to think of another word that rhymes with weird, seared, and beard.
Yeah, Amy, I'm putting that on you. You are.
Do you guys cry a lot? Can we call it "Keep It Tiered"?
Oh,
Keep It Tiered.
Keep It Tiered would honestly be good because Julia is the emotional part of the bonus episodes. The reason that we're bringing her back is because so many listeners requested her and love her, and it's because she talked about hospice care, which brings the tears. So,
Keep It Tiered.
Keep It Tiered. Julia.
Well, we did it.
Right.
We did a lot
You're
today.
welcome.
Thanks, Amy.
Nailed it.
Make sure you guys are following us on social media at Keep It Weirdcast. That's our handle. Donate to our Patreon to get discounts on merch, shout-outs on the show, giveaways, bonus episodes, and a newsletter every single month. It's a pretty choice Patreon, if I do say so myself.
It's pretty great.
And we actually put things on there. I know there are a lot of podcasts out there that are very popular that promise you an episode every month and can't even deliver on that. Guess what, bitches? We always do. You can find it all at www.patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast and grab a piece of merch from our Etsy store. We've got shirts, mugs, sweatpants, blankets, tank tops, and hoodies, and you can find it all at www.etsy.com/shop/keepitweirdpodcast. Amy,
Sing us a song, Piano Man.
it's time.
Oh, God. Okay. Arson is bad, murder is worse. If you're gonna touch a kid, go watch TV first. Here's an idea for something you can go see. Saved by the Bell is good for you and me. You should just go and watch the new Saved by the Bell. And if you do that instead of touching kids, you won't go to hell. Let's all protect all the children in the world. Watch Saved by the Bell and don't murder girls.
Wow, you've done it again.
How do you always
George.
do it? I mean, I just love you.
Keep
it
weird. Basically, outsiders of any kind. Sorry.
I felt like that came so quickly after you finished the sentence. I wasn't ready.
I didn't even get the D out.
Oh, boy.
In the word kind.